Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Digest. This is Dan Lizette, and this is episode 119. This week's podcast brought to you by Podbean. Podcast hosting and monetization is the easiest way to get started podcasting. If you go to podbean.com/TPD to learn more, you'll get your first month free, and they've got some very special pricing going on in December of 2016. I'll tell you about in just a little while. This show is also brought to you by supporters like yourself. Those of you listening right now, Patreon supporters. I could not do this without you guys, and it means a lot to me for the few, the proud of you who've jumped on and supported the Podcast Digest. And in fact, there is a new supporter on Patreon. I would like to take a moment and thank, just hopped on board, Mr. Ed Stier. Thank you very much for signing up as a Patreon and supporting the Podcast Digest. So this is episode 119, and this is a big one for me. I've been a huge fan of Someone Knows Something from the CBC ever since it started. And I've learned more about the case that the host and producer David Ridgen has covered and just been enthralled with the story. And just recently, season 2 has now come out with a whole brand new case, and David is investigating this one as well, and it is just as intriguing, even just a few episodes in at this point. And I think if you've not heard of Someone Knows Something, this will be an eye-opening experience for you and something very different than some of the other shows I've featured, and I really hope that you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, let's hop into my conversation with Mr. David Ridgen from Someone Knows Something. Folks, once again, welcome back to the Podcast Digest. And as I mentioned up front, really excited for my guest this week. I've been a fan of the show for a very long time, and it's super excited to see it entered a second season. The first time on the Podcast Digest, a warm welcome to Mr. David Ridgen from Someone Knows Something. David, welcome.
Hey, Dan, thanks very much.
Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. And there's a whole bunch to talk about with this show. I've been hearing that there's a lot of people. I saw recently you were mentioned in the Bellow Collective newsletter lately. I know you've got some fans out there that would love to hear more about this great work that you're doing. But for anyone who's not familiar with yourself, David, I was doing a little bit of research today and found out that you've got a pretty eclectic back catalog and resume. Can you tell folks a little bit about yourself before the podcast?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I guess I started off always wanting to be a filmmaker and kind of went from there. I grew up in a small town in Eastern Ontario, which is, of course, where season 1 is based, in Arnprior, where Adrian McNaughton also grew up. Went to university for film production and thereafter immediately went to become a teacher because I couldn't get any work in film production. At the time, it was kind of a mini recession going on. So I taught for 4 years. I was up in the Arctic. I taught over in the Middle East and Lebanon. And then I came back and taught in Toronto here for a while. And after that, I realized that I really continued to want to be a filmmaker. So started making documentaries and went to work for TV Ontario for a few years. It's a publicly funded broadcaster here in Ontario. I think probably 2 or 3 years I was there. And I started making a documentary in the Middle East and kind of back and forth a few years. Geez, what did I do after that? Then I guess I got my job at CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is Canada's public broadcaster, national. It's a tax-funded, operation, and Crown Corporation. So I worked there for many years, doing documentaries, long form and short form. This is for television, so I would be the shooter. I would have my camera and my gear, and I'd be a one-person show. So I would shoot everything, I would edit everything myself, produce it myself, write it, and actually very handy for podcasting, I've learned. And right. Then I left CBC to be independent, and I continued making documentaries, cold case, especially while I was at CBC. I worked in particular on a documentary that I think Americans will probably remember in the South, in the American South in Mississippi, the case of Henry D. and Charles Moore, who were killed by the Klan in 1964. Worked on that documentary and over a long period of time with Thomas Moore, the brother of one of the victims, and we managed to basically, we kicked the hornet's nest enough. We got enough information. We met the right U.S. attorney. A lot of the doors opened, and we kept pushing for the truth and justice in that case. And eventually, one of the Klansmen responsible went to prison, died in prison, and the other Klansman testified against him in court. And then I guess I got the investigative bug from that. So that was at CBC, and I continued when I got back to Canada after that documentary and continued with other cold cases here, Canadian families that had, lost or had family members who went missing or family members who were murdered. And I worked with them on like 4 or 5 different cases. Lots of different things, lots of documentaries. After that, I went over to Thailand for a while, and I was shooting short documentaries about elephants. And, life has been just one long, interesting ride. And I guess after a while, after I left, CBC came to me and said, hey, why don't you come back into this crime world, this true crime world? And, I thought I had left that scene because it is quite difficult to continue with it. When I gather these cases around me and the family members around me, they really become kind of part of my extended family. And it's, all the people I've been working with over the years have become, I connected to me. So I talk to them yearly and monthly sometimes. And I just didn't know if I wanted to get back into that world, but I had never done a podcast before. I really was interested in the writing aspect, interested in being the host and using my voice to convey, a story. And all the things seemed to come together. So I agreed to do it. We found a couple of cases. We found many cases, and we picked a few. First one being Adrian McNaughton's case. And then, of course, the second one, which is Cheryl Shepard's case, which brings us to season 2.
I guess I pretty much said it right. A pretty amazing and eclectic resume and back catalog. I was on your site today, ridgenfilm.com, and there'll be a link in the show notes for that as well. And I was going through some of those documentaries that you have on there, and I'm kind of curious, before we get into the podcast world, I know that the documentary filmmaking was such a huge part of, your prior experience in that world. Just from somebody who's a complete noob to that space, some of these topics that you covered, how do you even start to come across some of these topics and then locate, some of the subjects and start that process? I was thinking of one in particular I was watching on the urban explorers with the vacated homes and things of that nature. Like, how do you even come into some of these topics of your films?
I come at it in a kind of a different way. I mean, everybody probably would love to say that, but I had a strong interest in that case in the urban exploration, which for people who don't know is there's a large subculture of people throughout the world who enjoy looking at abandoned places, enjoy going to abandoned places, photographing them, staging plays in them, reading poetry there, doing other kind of semi-naughty things there, and just exploring places that people have left behind, humans have left behind, kind of the world without us. I've always been fascinated with those kinds of pictures and photographs, and I think that it's kind of in the air now. I see it all over the place, but at the time that I had started this documentary, I hadn't seen very many, and I thought, I'd really like to do a documentary about a group of people that goes and does that, and I want to find a really eclectic group of people. I kind of designed it in my head. That's why I'm talking about doing it differently. Like I kind of imagine what the story could be, and then I find the people to populate that story. And that's basically, if you can think it, my feeling is that there'll be a character out there that represents your story. So I went out purposely looking for a character who, and when I say character, I mean a real person, who, would go into these places and do all these things and be a great photographer. So all it takes is a little bit of looking around, and you can find online pretty quickly the people that are good photographers and do this kind of stuff. So I reached out to one of them. They all have pseudonyms. So this guy's pseudonym was Germ9, Jermix, Roman numerals. And he got back to me, and it's all very secretive, and it's like, who are you, man? And, I have to kind of, win the trust of these people somewhat, like, kind of talking to family members and saying, hey, can I work with you on this case of your missing daughter or your missing son or whatever? And you just convince them to work on it with you, and you kind of sell the dream of the film to people. And, you kind of invite yourself into their world. And I actually ended up just loving it. I actually have gone out with my son and lots of people. I've taken lots of people to the locations that were in that film, and In fact, I used many of the locations from that urban exploration film in my feature drama, which I wrote afterwards. I wrote a drama and populated those buildings with characters, real characters, like in a screenplay. And we shot in a lot of these abandoned buildings and used them as our sets.
It was an amazing piece, and there's so many on the website. I have to admit, I only touched on a few just to get a flavor of some of your previous experience. And folks, I'll reiterate, there's a link in the show notes, and you could get lost in some of this stuff that you've done. It's super interesting, and what was interesting to me was it seemed that I could already sort of see your style from making it all the way through season 1 and beginning season 2 of Someone Knows Something. I could see that sort of coming out in some of the pieces I was watching. It's almost like, even though it's a completely different medium, I could sense your style incorporated as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. No one has really ever made those connections before in an interview. No, I mean, people have always said, "Oh, you got really cool stuff on your website." Anyway, so what about your podcast? Like, nobody's really kind of made those connections, so I find that interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, and the other one I'm thinking too was one, and I do want to jump to the podcast, but the one with the veterinarian, right, and helping all the dogs with the the elephant park that exploded into hundreds and hundreds of dogs, and I think maybe that's the one where I really sort of sensed it, and maybe it was because a little bit. And Someone Knows Something, and I don't want to jump the gun or steal your thunder, but you mentioned it already about identifying with the people going through the situation that they have. That came through in the story that you were telling with the veterinarian as well, and I think that's primarily where I was really drawing that connection.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Thailand. I actually was fortunate enough to get an Ontario Arts Council grant of some money to do a series of documentaries at an elephant park, basically an elephant sanctuary. But it's not just elephants. There's any number of different animals, other animals that are present on this site in Thailand. And just a gorgeous site. So I went. I didn't even have any idea what I was going to see, just a lot of interesting creatures and people. So I think I made 9 or 10 little documentaries up to, say, 10 minutes. Maybe the shortest is 2 minutes. And I just think you have to be passionate you have to love your characters. You have to love the characters. You have to love what they're doing. And I think that comes across in everything you do as you do it. And I think I tried to tell the stories without voiceover, which is interesting. I don't really like voice of God kind of narration where the filmmaker's telling everybody what to think all the time. And I don't like leading people by the hand normally, which is I had to kind of pull that. I kind of had to pull back from that a bit in my podcast. I have to actually do a lot of leading, which is difficult for me sometimes. So I enjoy just laying things out and letting people pick up the pieces themselves and examine them and put those puzzles together on their own. So if people want to go to the website and check that stuff out, I'd be interested to hear what they have to say about it.
Absolutely. And you just made my segue for me, David. I really appreciate it. Let's talk about getting the podcast up. So you mentioned sort of in the timeline, CBC gives you a call and says, hey, come back. Was the idea of coming back to launch an investigative-based podcast?
Yeah, it was basically, we want you to come back and we want you to do an investigative podcast. That's exactly what it was. And I said no. and then I thought about it for a while, and I thought, okay, this is something that you can challenge yourself with. This is something you can sink your teeth into. It might be something that's worthwhile for a family or a number of families if you work with them. And I talked myself into it. So I basically went in cold. I hadn't listened to any of the podcasts out there, Serial included. And to this day, I've only listened to half of one episode of Serial. Haven't watched Making a Murderer, haven't listened to watched The Jinx, and purposely I do that because I don't want to try to duplicate them. I think in the end, what's interesting is you probably all converge into the same territory anyways. Right. I've done this before. I've worked on cold cases since 2004 with family members. This is something I'm used to doing, immersing myself in a case and, just wrapping myself around a podcast or wrapping a podcast around me, I guess it was. It's just a different wrapper for the same experience, right? So I was used to it, and I didn't want to be preordained by anybody else's work. And we just started cold, trying to develop the story and the series. And how are we going to go about this, and whose voice are we talking in, and all those kinds of things. So I had nothing to compare myself to, so I just wrote, and I thought, I like this, I like that, so let's put it into the podcast. And we basically came up with a cinematic kind of feel, right? It's a cinematic. It's almost like it's a screenplay. That's how I look at the episodes, and I use my voice to lead people through the screenplay, through the drama of the case.
Let's get into some nuts and bolts of season 1, David. Adrian McNaughton, you mentioned already, was the focus, the cold case that you dove deep into for season 1. What was the process of selecting that as the first season of Someone Knows Something?
The process of going through Adrian's case, I mean, really, it's kind of like dive in, get the content, like go there, go to the location, and start with the family and move out. Right. Start with the family, start with what the people who were there on the day. And then from there, they'll tell you what their suspicions are. They'll tell you what their theories are. They'll tell you how they feel, what was happening. And from there, you have to structure the different paths, the possible different pathways that you can take. And I think that's probably the way I would start with every cold case, is with the family. They have collected the most information about the person who's missing or dead. So you have a chance to look through all their material. And then knowing what they have, then you can start to design the arc of the series. And maybe, you could probably throw ahead 4 or 5 episodes based out of a couple of meetings with the family. I happened to meet the family several times and record them, and go up to Holmes Lake myself several times before I was able to kind of figure out how I would even start the series. But I guess the short answer is you start with what's known and then move towards the unknown.
You mentioned a lot of the other podcasts out there, and what's funny is in the fall of 2016, as we sit here and talk, my listeners are probably thinking I'm in a complete true crime / investigative journalism kick, because I really have been talking to a lot of the folks that make these wonderful shows. I've had Madeline Barron from In the Dark. I talked with Amber Hunt and Amanda Rossman from Accused just recently, and now today. What's different about Someone Knows Something, and I'm curious about the story arc you were talking about and developing, and how this came into your mind in terms of planning. Some of those other shows I mentioned, and even Serial for people who are familiar with that, of course, a lot of that kind of looked back and sort of investigated the investigation and sort of made you ask a lot of hard questions about the job that the authorities did. That's not exactly the track that you took. There's an element of that, I would say, but you almost sort of tried to open doors that hadn't even been seen before, and investigated a lot of pieces. What was the thought process when you were deciding kind of which elements to suss out in Adrian's story?
Well, when you go into any case, that police and investigators, they leave a lot behind that hasn't been sifted. They leave a lot of information that sort of falls at the wayside because they have a target idea. Pretty early on, investigators form this opinion of what happened to the person or who's responsible. And because of that, there's kind of this tunnel vision that I talk about in season 1. And you find all this evidence and information at the wayside that hasn't really been properly sifted. So it is kind of like reinvestigating. You find people that I just like freestyling a little bit. I would go to a person's house to interview them because they were apparently the old guy on the scene that would know everybody. And this other person came in, and he's the guy actually using the podcast because he was there. He was searching. He lived across the street. His grandmother lived in the oldest cabin on the lake, kind of thing, And these are the people that actually, you just kind of, the luck comes to you because you kind of make the educated guess to go to the person who has all these connections. And then, in fact, that does exist in one of the episodes. The fellow who doesn't speak so kindly about Mr. McNaughton, he just walks in while I'm interviewing another fellow who actually doesn't even make it into the podcast. And I felt that he was one of the more interesting characters, more interesting voices. So I guess things just happen by luck. And also when I go into structuring something, it's more like an artistic endeavor for me. I'm an investigator. I'm a self-taught investigator, self-taught journalist, really. And I kind of go by my gut. It's hard to describe. People say, how did you design the arc? How do you know what to do? But I just kind of start writing the story in screenplay format, and it kind of works its way out. The story only has a certain number of routes to take, and you follow them to the end, the logical end.
Well, maybe a better question might be this. What about the decisions to take the actual practical investigative steps you took, that the hands-on, the dogs, the divers? I mean, you went really, really far to do the absolute best reporting you could. I mean, but a lot of the stories or podcasts that we've been talking about, they're not introducing elements like that into a particular investigation.
Well, yeah, no, from my understanding is that many investigative podcasts aren't actually investigating anything. They're actually telling the story of an investigation, but they're not actually undertaking an investigation. I mean, that's what we're doing. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that's what you're asking. Yeah. No, like I actually want to solve the case. Like I actually want to find new information. So, and I also want to value add. Like I don't want to come in and just tell a good story well. I don't want to tell a nice yarn. I want to actually kick the hornet's nest. Like I want to make something happen. So value added, we go into every episode and we say, how can we value add in this episode? How can the process of making the podcast help the audience, the family, everybody involved? Because nobody that I work with wants to waste their time on the little limited time we have on the planet. So we want to make a difference. That's the number one aim of SKS.
And I think that's exactly it. That's the difference between Someone Knows Something and some of the other shows we're talking about. And I think that comes through for the listener, because it's one thing, and I'm not denigrating any of those other shows. I'm huge fans of many of them, which is why I keep bringing them up. But with what you've done with yours, it's a completely different experience when you're standing on the side of the lake and there's divers going in, or you hear the dogs barking as you're walking through the forest, that type of thing. It's a different, it's almost like being there as opposed to hearing about being there. And it's a phenomenal thing that I think you've created with this show as a whole.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think the show is at its strongest in process. I think we're at our strength is documenting the process of investigation, and then also coming to the end points and finding that person finally that you've been looking for. And the process of finding the person is interesting, but then of course you get to talk to them, and they might know something, and then you move to the next node, and on the way to that person or character, you have this process. And I think our strength, from what I've been able to gather from what people have told me and what I have going around in my head, is that process is really the name of the game. Investigative process.
And and a lot of the process that I'm interested in as a listener is sort of how this all came together. And I know that you couldn't have done this all by yourself. You got pictures, videos, maps on the website. This is an exhaustive presentation. Can you talk about sort of some of your teammates and colleagues that helped put this whole thing together and how that all that happened?
Yeah, I have colleagues that work with me for sure. Last year, it was a very small team. And this year, it's a small team too, but I have a different kind of help this year. Last year, I mean, I do take all the pictures. I do video all the video, and I do all the audio.
Wow.
So, and I shoot with a camera and often record audio at the same time. People don't know that they might hear my clicking, but they don't know that I'm also videoing while I'm talking to a subject, or I'm literally like a cyborg guy. I've got like 2 or 3 mics going at any one time, and they're all really high quality mics with really great preamps. And that it's important to be a one person band sometimes, because you can't get the intimacy with your subjects. So I don't want to have a huge crew hanging around. I don't want to have a huge crew hanging around when I'm, trying to get, into some difficult spaces with people. On the other hand, in the dive, they're volunteers. We had these great divers, Mike Grebler and his team, and Kim Cooper with her dogs. And, these people just volunteered their time. We've done 3 dives, and these people have volunteered hours, endless hours, and equipment and food and gas. And those people are amazing. They come and help make the story, because they also are passionate and want to find solutions. But at CBC, so say this year, season 2, I've got a colleague named Stephanie Camp. She's a producer and an investigator. She's a very experienced investigator here in Canada. and another fellow named Chris Oak, who's, sort of my right-hand man. He helps me with any scripting revisions that I do. And he helps with pretty much any aspect of the investigation that I ask him to. And then we have, senior producer Arif Noorani, and we have a mixer named Cecil Fernandez. And the mixer is really amazing. Cecil's like a genius. He's like a magician. And he's the one who takes all my natural sound and puts it into the thing and makes it sound into the mix and makes it sound like a film, or a screenplay, like a cinematic, right? So, but I write all the scripts. I write all the dialogue. We have transcribers. We have like 4 transcribers right now working full time for season 2 because I'm bringing product into the house, and I'm also writing scripts, and we're also voicing episodes. So, it's all happening at the same time. And then I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the process, I can get into more about the process of how that all happens too, if you want. But
yeah, we will definitely talk about how it's sort of getting ahead a little bit, but I want to jump to the end of season 1. As somebody who came from your background, in documentary film and the other thing, teaching and the other things you've done, and you mentioned this was your first foray into podcasting. Podcasting, obviously, as you mentioned, is very different. If for nothing else, it's episodic nature. But how did you feel personally when this whole thing was done? Was it a sense of satisfaction, exhausting, or ready to start again?
Oh, it was exhausting. I mean, obviously, I felt like we needed to kind of continue. I don't really like giving up, and we haven't. I mean, we've continued with season 2, but I've also continued with season 1. I was in the water 2 weeks ago moving logs in Holmes Lake, and I actually broke one of my tendons. Snapped right off, snapped in 2, and I had like a golf ball sized thing on my arm, but that will never be talked about again. Anyway, so yeah, we were shifting logs. Anyway, I don't like to give up on these cases, and even the cases I worked on years ago, I'm looking into things, and if there's an opportunity to look into something, I will, or call somebody, and I never really give up on it once it gets into my head. And over time, it may change my intention, or my attack on the case may change, and my the amount of attention I'd be able to give it. But I don't really like to give up. Certainly, season 1, we are continuing. We've done 3 dives now. We did 1 during the season and 2 afterwards. And there's going to be an update coming very soon, which I don't want to blow. But
no,
there's some
subscribe now, folks.
Yeah, there's some interesting things coming out in the update for season 1.
How did the family feel after this all came out, or while it was coming out?
The McNaughton family is a very private family. You probably heard, at innumerable times, Chantel McNaughton talking about how private the family is, and they're very introverted sort of group. But I think the overall feeling I felt from them and heard from them was, thank you. We're glad we went through this. They were able to speak to the police in the end. This is part of the update, which I'm going to kind of give away a bit. The police actually came to the McNaughton's house, and they were able to talk to them. And police told them that they hadn't heard some of the evidence that we picked up, like the black and white car. The police had never heard that before, and they were able to talk to us. And well, I don't want to give any more away.
No. I guess I was just making sure that, did they happen to listen to the show, or were people around town starting to talk to them because this is now out there, or something to that effect?
Yes. No, they listened to the show. They listened to the episodes, and they liked them. And I think the town was nutty for it, of course. The town listened to every episode. And it's a pretty small town. Everybody knows each other. It's like 7,500 people.
Right.
And they didn't feel inundated. They weren't getting calls all the time or anything. I mean, they would see people in the shopping center and they'd talk to them about it, but I don't think it was any huge rush. I just think that they didn't understand, and I didn't understand, that we would have such huge audience response. Like we had, what we had people all over the world responding to this case, and they didn't get that, their involvement would be able to go that far. And in a case like Adrian's, where he, possibly could be somewhere else, it's the best thing you could supply. So I think they were happy with that.
Hey, folks, let me jump in here just one quick moment so I can tell you about this week's show sponsor. It is Podbean. It's podcast hosting and monetization. If for some reason you've never heard of Podbean, it's really the easiest way to start podcasting or the best new home for your podcast if you're looking for something more. Podbean has all kinds and tons of great features that you need to know about. If you're looking to do something different, let's say you've already got a podcast. Let's say you want to make some episodes premium or maybe start a patron program. Podbean will let you do that. They've got integrated monetization tools, including an advertising platform right there for you. So if you've got a show that you're looking to take to the next level, consider Podbean. You're going to become part of their online directory. You're going to have promotional opportunities through that directory for your show. You could get set up with a mobile app, either on Android or RSS. Now, if you're new and starting out, that's fine too. Of course, you can have a website created right there through Podbean for your show that you're going to be able to customize with different themes and colors. If you've already got a website and you're starting a show, this service with Podbean will integrate easily into your own website. Of course, all the RSS and iTunes support that you'll need, including importing, redirect it if you are coming from another podcast host, all kinds of sharing tools, automatically share out to all the socials, all the Twitters and the Facebooks with quality guys, really high quality embeddable players. There's all kinds of different things that you can do with Podbean, whether you're a new podcaster or you're one who's a vet looking for a new home. Podbean is the place to go. Now, if you go to podbean.com/TPD, you're going to get your first month free, and as well as learning all kinds of more information than what I can tell you here in this quick little ad read. But more importantly than any of that, maybe, is they've got a promotional price for the balance of December 2016. So if you're listening to this in December 2016, Podbean is offering 30% off for the rest of this year of their normal hosting pricing. So there couldn't be a better time to check out Podbean if you're a podcaster or interested in becoming one. Once again, my thanks to Podbean for their support of the Podcast Digest. Now back to the interview. Yeah, and the listener feedback you mentioned, it sounds like it was critically acclaimed. The reception was good, I take it.
It was good. Yeah, I think that for the most part, reception was very good. I think people coming from something like Serial or maybe some of the other podcasts weren't maybe expecting, to how long I allow things to happen or scenes I allow to build, and it's not just matter of fact. It's like it's like really happening, right? It's a real investigation, and the process gets shown in the podcast. Some people I don't think enjoy that. I think they want to just be told, okay, we went to the lake, we found this, this, and this. Okay, next. I don't know that, or hear two people talking in a garage or whatever other podcasts are. I'm not sure, but that's not what we do. And I think if there's probably 5 or 10% of maybe 5% of the population that just isn't into it, and that's fine. But we've certainly had from the other 90 or 95%, 5 out of 5.
Excellent. Yeah, and you were sitting there describing the differences, and this thought just hit me. Some of the other shows like Serial you're talking about, if the term is investigative journalism, I think some of those other shows are emphasizing the journalism, where you're definitely emphasizing the investigative part.
Yeah,
I just had that thought cross my mind.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there is that difference that's been pointed out to me as well. It's also, I mean, it's not always about what the expectations of what happens either. It's just, again, it's about the process. It's about how the family is changing throughout. It's about what we learn about life. But, we like to, again, value add in other ways. So anyway, I hope that people discover that on their own.
Yeah, and I think you actually, to me, as a listener, I think you hit one of the biggest highlights here, which is the awareness that's been raised. This has been broadcast out all over the world now, and people have heard it everywhere. And if nothing else, a sense of satisfaction's got to come from that in terms of prior to you kicking this effort off. I'm sure there weren't, many people in, say, the U.S. that may have been intimately familiar with this story, but now there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and people respond. I get emails all the time from people. We've actually received over 100 really credible, interesting cases from people from all over North America. Like, come and help us with my family member. Here's a whole bunch of digital information. You have access to this, this, and this. And these are people that they're a real case. And, we get lots of emails from people that are, that just are, I don't know if they're actual real people or not, but I'm talking about like 100, 110 actual real cold cases with real family members have reached out to us, which I think is phenomenal. And we have this huge, backlog of cases now, and we could never hope to cover, but, I wish we could, There's a lot of cold case shows out there. So hopefully someone else, if we don't, someone else can.
Well, that again is a perfect transition to post season 1. As that's wrapping up and you're absorbing all this feedback from the listeners, from the family, your own sense of satisfaction with the completed first season. Talk to me about what happens next. Was CBC on board immediately for season 2, or what was the in-between process like?
Yeah, CBC basically wanted their belief, and I guess to some extent my belief, is that the sophomore season is almost more important in terms of embedding it into the sort of brand of, or into the audience, and making us a real show. So the idea was you gotta keep going. You gotta find another case. You gotta get out there and you gotta do another one, right away. You gotta capitalize on the success. It's only going to make cases better. It's only going to make police want to cooperate more. It's only going to make family members, more interested. So, and to some extent, they're actually absolutely right. And I agreed with them. So it's been exhausting. It's just been nonstop since we launched. Well, actually, since well before we launched, I guess, 2 summers ago when I started this off with the McNaughtons. It's been nonstop for me. And, I'm not sure what they will want to have happen at the end of this season, but we'll see how it rolls out. I'm pretty sure there'll be another one though, and fairly short order.
So the selection for season 2, for the case that you focus on at season 2, was this one you sort of had in the back of your mind even during the initial research for season 1, something that caught your eye, or was it something that came up after season 1?
Yeah, what happened is when we do the research, and you probably know it, you get a huge number of binders and folders, on your table, and some of them are in the sort of viable pile, and others are in the sort of maybe pile, and others just get discarded until later. And the viable pile is something that has family members that are passionate and interested in participating, possibly police who are willing to cooperate in some manner. And the location's important as well. And in first season, we were really interested in a small location. And to some extent, we wanted to build the podcast originally around small towns. And I really like that idea. And I think we may go back in the next season, if there is another season, to a smaller area. Just because there's sort of a pressure cooker that happens, a situation when that everybody does know each other and things start to move in that direction. So yeah, you have a number of cases. Each of them has sort of a number of things that we're looking for. And maybe there's even a viable suspect or a few people that people have always had their eye on. And that's always of interest as well. So the cases that have more of those items than others get put into the sort of more viable pile in our estimation. And the location's interesting too. If the location is a great place to build a story or, has something added that we think will be special for an audience or represents a community that's underrepresented, we'd be interested in that as well.
So this one was the top of your viable pile, I take it?
This case, the Cheryl Shepard case, was definitely on the radar from the beginning of season 1, along with about 10 or 15 other cases. And we decided to go with the Armprior sort of origin story. And McNaughton's story, because I'd already made sort of access interviews and discussions with the family, and I kind of felt like I had to go with that. And also people thought it would be a great way to introduce the podcast through my hometown kind of thing. And it is something I've always wanted to do, and it just all kind of matched up. So, and then second season, it was a toss-up between several other cases, which I won't talk about. And it was decided that Cheryl Shepard's case would be season 2, and Cheryl lived in Hamilton, Ontario, which is it's not an old city. I guess it's an older city, in Canada, but it's also, a steel town. So, Hamilton used to be a really booming steel production, city. and I think fell on hard times in the last 20 years, and is kind of down on its luck a little bit in the last, say, 10 years. But in the last 5, I think it started to kind of rejuvenate. There's been a bit more steel production. There's been people moving in, buying up this sort of cheaper houses and gentrifying, and the real estate market's starting to boom, and film companies are coming in and, you know, shooting all these kind of abandoned places. So urbexers loved Hamilton. And it's got this kind of infamous blue-collar quality to it as a city. So it was an interesting, as I think I say in the podcast, it's a character itself. So it was almost like we were investing in a new character as well as a new territory to make this production about Cheryl Shepard.
And at the time of this recording, there's only one episode live, but I believe folks will be about to receive episode 3 if they're listening to this on the day of its release. So I don't want to talk about too much or give away too much, but I know in episode 1, one of the most interesting things I heard already was the existence of a video of not just the focus of the case, but I guess a prime suspect. And that had to intrigue at least a bit when you were selecting this as the second season.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there was a prime suspect in the beginning, let's just say without the tape existing, it was interesting. And, this idea that everybody thinks they know who did it, or the police think they know, or the media thinks they know, it was interesting to us as well, because maybe they don't know, and maybe there's a lot of other suspects, and that process of, changing the direction of a focus is interesting as well. But yeah, we discovered that Michael Lavoie had proposed to Cheryl Shepard on live television, of all things, 2 days before she disappeared. And so we have the tape, we have the video, we have the audio, which you hear in episode 1, and I think we bring it in again in episode 2. Actually, we bring it in several episodes. And it's just fascinating because it's endlessly interesting sort of, I think it must be less than 2-minute piece of tape. And you're just desperate to parse it out, every single second of it, and try to figure out if there's any meaning behind it. At this point, I'm not prepared to talk about Michael as the definite or the not definite or whatever, but is there meaning?
I don't think I'd want you to.
Well, no. Is there meaning behind what's going on in the tape? Believe me, there's other people other than Michael Lavoie, and other reasons why Cheryl might have disappeared. I'll just say that we've discovered already. So, but Michael, again, he's front and center in this video. So it's what we had to work with when we came into the case. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned the video, and that was and that's, to me, and folks listening, if that doesn't get you to go check this out, the idea of a proposal on live TV 2 days before the victim's disappearance. I mean, right there, I'm like, okay, what's going on? Right then and there, just from that moment, the premise in and of itself is intriguing, and I can't wait to see where the season goes and what you guys are finding. If you're willing to share this, David, I like to take people behind the scenes a little bit. As we sit here, and episode 1 is currently out right now, and people listening have already received 2, and they're about to get 3. Where do you stand at this moment with the process? Is the season done? Are you still actively investigating? Sort of where, or do you even know the ending, the last episode yet?
Yeah, no, it's an active
not what is the ending, but it's in the process.
It's an active investigation, and in fact, we design it that way so that we can we can have episodes that are open in case people come back with information. We can include them in the new episode in the future. So we're in the can. We have a few episodes. We have several episodes kind of sketched and partly written and waiting to have new stuff added. And then we have several that are just blank slates. So it's actually nail biting. It's like we actually roll out without knowing where we're going. And
that's amazing.
We do that on purpose because we don't want the audience to think we know the answer. If the audience thinks we know the answer, then it's bullshit, right? Like if the audience thinks we already know what happened, then it's like, well, we just hear it on the news if they caught him, right? Like, why are we listening to this? Right? Like, so.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So we have to really do it. We have to actually not know yet, right? So, saying that, we can make educated guesses and we can make leaps forward. We've, got a lot of information under our belt. We're fairly certain of our trajectory here, although there's a couple of different trajectories at least that we're facing right now. The most important interviews of the case are being undertaken right now. I'll tell you that. And it's that's just the way it has to work. We do a lot of work to come to this moment, and then the barn doors open, and all the horses run out. And
so, what are your days like right now, David? Between episode releases and investigating and phone calls, and I mean, you must be putting in like 18-hour days.
They're pretty nutty. I'm working on a script right now as I talk to you, and I've
multitasking.
Yeah, and we get everything transcribed, so it's a matter of we layer the transcripts together, and not layer them. We hunt and peck for the pieces that we want, and then I do the scripting and re-scripting, and then we revise when new evidence comes in. When you interview one person, you can do a script about them, but then if you interview 3 people, you have to take out half of what you did about the one person because what they said isn't right. So you have to start to remake the puzzle every single time you go out to interview somebody. So it's this constant Rubik's Cube, constantly moving around, maybe even more than a cube, actually. It's like a 3-level chessboard that we're playing on here. And luckily, we've been able to get some great access, which I think even you would probably find kind of stunning at the end of the season.
Oh, I pretty much guarantee I will. I'm expecting to be stunned if season 1 is any indication, because I'm fascinated with the effort it takes to put something like this together. And I think a lot of folks are. And that's really one of the things I want to do when I talk to people who produce a show anywhere near in the category of what you do with Someone Knows Something. Looking back at season 1, because season 2 is literally still in stream. If I had to back you into a corner and force you to put a number on it, how many hours of audio was collected that ultimately resulted in season 1?
Hang on a second.
You've got that number.
I've got it right here. I've got the hard drive backup right here. I just want to see if I can just check and see if there's any way I can detail that for you.
Yeah, I'd like to give folks an idea of all that goes into something like this, because I'm sure this number's hundreds, right?
I'll try to count for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5, 6, 7, 28, 29, 30, 31. But 35 days of audio there, and that's. When I do audio, I do like an 8-hour day.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So that's what, 260 at least? 260 hours?
Yep. So, yeah, that's around there. 35 days of recording, and that's all over the place, right? So, and
that's
that goes
amazing.
from, I can do my dates here. That goes from November 3rd, 2015. No, that doesn't make sense, does it? Yeah. November 3rd, 2015. No, October. I'm sorry. No, we're looking at January. I'm sorry, October 2015 until last week.
There you go. And I just top of my head, what total audio on season 1 was just over 9 hours or so?
I think so. Yeah, it ended up being around there. Yeah,
somewhere in that ballpark. So this is a ridiculous question, but it just blows the mind. From an editing standpoint, it made me think of this when you were describing how, you've got an episode set with one interview and then 2 others come in and now you've got to cut all this. What's that process like on deciding what's important enough to be included and what can go?
Well, you have to have somebody at the center like myself who kind of keeps it all in play, but you also have to have some people that you trust, and I do in my workplace, who I tell everything to. And if they're not there, they know everything through the transcript. And sometimes they accompany me on the interviews. And I really need a brain, it's like a multi-brain to kind of keep all the different pieces in order. And it's really difficult. Luckily, as I said, Cecil Fernandez is our mixer, and he's very fast. He's very efficient, but he's also extremely artistic. So we're able to go really quickly with him this season. He's able to do updates. Like I update a script every day, and he updates the mix so that we always have a proper mix. It's insane. Like the pieces, as I say, you pull a piece out, the other piece has to be filled in with 3 other different pieces, and then you have to change the position of those pieces and then move them around into different scripts. And it's literally a nightmare for somebody, but it isn't. It has to be this way. This is the way this is. It's not 2 guys in a garage talking, right? Like this is a real case. It's a living case. Like it's a living case, and we have to be ready to go at any moment with the story. And we try to put the best story we can together. And, you get the situation where you hear the same story from 4 people and you realize they've been sourcing it from 1 person. So what do? Do you use the 4 people telling the same story? No, you go find the 1 person, right? So you've just wasted your time with 4 people, and you have to go find the 1 person they got the story from. Right. And that's investigation. That's how you get the source. That's how you get to how that person saw something or witnessed something. But you don't find that out without going out the door 4 times first. Unless a nice policeman is willing to give you the entire file or something, which isn't going to happen.
That would be nice, though, right? Does it feel as if we're
investigating on our own in the dark a little bit? But doing it is fascinating, and you can always find new info. And it's amazing what people are willing to talk about. Affiliations change, friendships change. Family members die, or different hindrances change in a person's life. They forget what they weren't supposed to say, or people just want to come forward and talk and help, and sometimes they remember something new that they never told the police. So it is important that we talk to everybody that was close to the case.
It's got to be an intense process, that's for sure. Now, obviously, there's differences case to case. I'm sure that it's hard to compare them. But from a podcast production standpoint, David, do you feel as if this one has so far gone better? Like some kinks were worked out? Like you're taking lessons learned, if you will, from season 1 onto season 2 and making this a better process? Do you feel like you, as a podcast producer, have gotten better at this, basically?
By far, I would say this season is running in a way that's more efficient than last season. I would say that we've gotten smarter in how we organize work, and we have people that are capable of churning out work in the kind of volume that we have to have, and we have people that are willing to put in the long hours. So yeah, I think we learned a lot from season 1. Season 1 was a different kind of case too. It was like I didn't have to spend as much time getting access. Hamilton is a completely different story. I didn't grow up there. I don't know the people there. I can know them, and I can, integrate with them. I can integrate with them, but it's a different kettle of fish, as you say. Armprior, I knew everybody to some extent, or at least they knew me, or at least they knew my sister or my brother or my dad or something. And it was a little bit easier to get access, although still people, wonder what that thing is you're shoving in their face, the microphone. But Hamilton's a whole different ball game, and it's a different level of activity. And Cheryl moved in different circles than what I'm used to. So, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but I'm talking to some, it's a different level of society that I'm talking to, kind of a criminal element. And some people just don't want to talk, not because of Cheryl, but because they don't want to get in trouble for something else they've done. And that's something that I'm never going to be privy to. I don't know what else you've done in your life. I just want to know about Cheryl, right? So I have to always kind of get under that layer for many of these people. So it's a different kind of case. So the process of access has taken a far longer time, and it's a much bigger burden in this season.
Have you run into this yet, David, where you were working on season 2, you're conducting these interviews, you're talking to these people, and had anyone recognized your name or the show?
I don't know, actually. I'm not, are you talking about people that I'm in the season 2 or people that I'm talking to as I go through daily life?
Almost as if you want to talk to somebody in reporting for season 2, and they say, "Oh, are you the guy that did that one?" that I just finished listening to the other week, season 1.
I've had that a little bit. Yeah, I have had that, but not as much as you might think. Canada, we're still kind of trying to educate people what podcasts are, and I think our show is largely doing that to some extent.
Right.
No, no hard feelings to the other podcasts that come out of Canada, but I would say that
or other CBC shows.
Someone Knows Something was a pretty big enterprise in the country here, and I think it sort of floated a few other podcast boats. And I think we're kind of still training people about podcasts in Canada. It's not as a big operation as it is in the States, I think, even though SKS is charting in the US and elsewhere. In Canada, of course, we're doing well. We did really well last year. Right now, I guess Gimlet's got, is it Undone or something's on Gimlet there on iTunes that's new, and we're at number 2 right now. But it's a process of teaching people in Canada the value of podcasts, and I think it's a message that's getting out there pretty quickly.
Well, with a show like yours, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, because like you said, the justification of my question was really, I sort of envisioned season 3, season 4, and at a point, if that growth does, that bomb sort of lands in Canada and everyone starts jumping on this, to a point where people are either going to be throwing themselves at you, like those emails and those cases you were talking about, or somebody may hesitate to talk to you because they know the type of work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways, doesn't it? Because people are going to realize that if they talk to me, there's the potential that their voice is going to be in the podcast. And I have been contacted by I have been contacted by a lot of companies, a lot of companies that are interested in working with me and developing television shows and things like that. That's for sure. Probably over 15.
Wow.
Some of them from Los Angeles and around Canada, and the big ones in Canada. And I mean, I talked to all of them. I'm not dazzled by dollar signs or anything like that. I like to do things I'm interested in, as you see from my website. So, but yeah, so people like that know me, and I think corporate interests are starting to kind of encircle podcasting and understand that it's sort of a capitalist opportunity. Like it's a way to brand their content and sell more cars and guns and butter and all that kind of stuff. And I frankly hope that it doesn't go too far that way, because I think podcasts, part of the pleasure of them is that anybody can do them and anybody can listen to them, and you don't want to over advertise them. I have one thing I've been told, and this has got nothing to do with anything you've asked me, or maybe it does. By some of my audience members, probably 10 or 15 people separately have come to me and said, you know what your podcast is like? It's like listening to a Sunday night radio in the 50s. And we go with our family, we set up here the radio, and we sit around it, and we listen to your podcast. I've had this from 10 or 15 different families, and they say it's a ritual every Monday or Sunday night, whenever they were able to get it, that they did this. And I like that. I think that's
great. Yeah, that is awesome. It almost makes me think that maybe I should do the same with my family. It would be a great thing, really. No, I can totally see that working for a family.
I think it's got something to do with the sort of ad at the top, like the soap ad or whatever, like the sort of early soaps or whatever. There would always be that ad off the top, and I think that might help. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
You made me think when you talk about other people reaching out to you. One of the things I heard, again, from the ladies with Accused, I'm wondering if this has happened to you yet as well, because it would be perfect, was people in a college or university reaching out and potentially using, the site, the write-ups, the case as almost course material for students to kind of relook at the facts as well. Right. I haven't been approached by any universities or anything like that yet, but I could see that happening for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've been approached to speak at places and be a guy who talks about writing and podcasts and things like that, of course, but not along the lines of what you're talking about. That's interesting.
Well, whether it be that, season 2, a TV show, whatever it is, I know one thing, David. I'm a huge fan of Someone Knows Something, and your work as a whole as well. I've really become intrigued in doing my research for this conversation. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join me, David. And please take as much time as you need. Tell folks where they can find Someone Knows Something, season 1, season 2, or if they're interested in finding about your whole back catalog of stuff.
Great. If you want to tune into Someone Knows Something, it's up here in Canada, CBC. You got to come get it. No, I guess you can go to www.cbc.ca/SKS, and from there you can link right to iTunes or just listen right off the website. And if you want, you can direct your browser or your phone to iTunes, your podcast app, and just search for Someone Knows Something on iTunes and subscribe. It's pretty easy, actually. It seems frightening to many people that don't know what a podcast is, I realize, but those people are not listening right now, I don't think.
No, probably not. And ridgenfilm.com, yes?
That's right. If you want to look at my website, Ridgen Film, it's RIDGENFILM.com.
And folks, I'm going to have links to that website as well as the links for Someone Knows Something in the show notes as well. Cannot recommend it any further than I do, folks. It's not like other shows, and with good reason, and I mean that in the best possible way. So, David Ridgen from Someone Knows Something, thank you very much for taking the time, sir.
Oh, geez. Thank you.
Well, folks, that'll do it for episode 119 here on the Podcast Digest. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mr. David Ridgen from the CBC and Someone Knows Something. What a great show. Start at season 1 and hop onto the season 2 bandwagon right now. It is an amazing, amazing podcast, and the efforts that David goes through to really kind of uncover new things with each of the cases that he's covering is astonishing. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, tell a friend for me, tweet about it, post it to your Facebook page, all right? And if you really want to help the show, take a moment, leave an iTunes review. That is huge for the show. It really goes a long way to raising the visibility of the show to all listeners. Or better yet, as I mentioned up front, you could become a Patreon supporter, like our recent Patreon edition, Mr. Ed Steer. So thanks again, Ed. And folks, links to all of that are in the show notes. This week's show is also brought to you by Podbean. My thanks to them. Podbean.com/TPD. Well, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, looking for a great home for your existing show, you'll get your first month free if you go through that special URL. And don't forget, I mentioned 30% off hosting fees between now and the end of December 2016. Again, my thanks to Podbean. And my thanks to you for taking the time to listen to the Podcast Digest. Huge episode 120 coming at you again next Sunday. Thank you all very much for the Podcast Digest. My name is Dan Lizette.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Digest. You can follow the show on Twitter at PodDigest. Like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Podcast Digest. Email the show feedback at thepodcastdigest@gmail.com. And you can find all the previous episodes and exclusive blog entries at the show's website, thepodcastdigest.info.